So, last week we talked about studying the Bible, and, I talked about reading the passage at least 10 times. I gave you homework. Do you remember what that homework is? Reading John chapter 4, was it verses 1 through 42? I think that's what it is. That's still your homework. If you haven't started, it's not too late. You can still do it. What I do want to share with you about this, keep reading it. I think it'll be due in a couple weeks here. But, the truth is, I don't expect you to read a Bible passage 10 times every single time you open your Bible or with every single passage that you read in the Bible. All right, I want to make that clear. I'm not talking about here reading the Bible. I'm talking about studying the Bible. So if you are interested in studying the Bible, then yes, by all means, read the passage 10 times. But it's not an expectation for you to do this every single time you open your Bible with every single passage. Because the truth is that you don't have the time. There it is. You don't have the time. How many of you just have tons of time on your hand? Anybody have tons of time on their hand? Anybody here? Okay, I didn't think so, right? The truth is you don't have the time to do that. Number two, you probably don't have the energy to do that. You probably don't have the interest to do that either every single time, unless you're a Sabbath school teacher, unless you're an elder, unless you're going to be preaching a sermon. Then yes, I would encourage you to spend a lot of time in the Bible passage, right? But if you're just trying to read the Bible, so don't place this false expectation that, I got to read this 10 times. No, we're talking about studying the Bible, all right? And again, it's because I know our time is limited. Not only is our time limited, and because our time is limited, I should say, because our time is limited, our interest is limited, this is where skill and training, and now I don't like to use this word, but I'll use it anyways, but this is kind of where the experts then come in, or the specialists come into play, because you don't have the time, because of our limitations to be able to study every single passage. Because of this limitation, this is where some individuals with skill or training, the experts, or this is where the specialists come into play. Now, I came across this meme the other day, and I don't know how many of you have seen this or not, but this is true in my case. So, when we had our firstborn, we fixed it. It wasn't that nice. We didn't fix it up that nice, but we did try to fix it up. We went and we got some paint, and we painted. One of the walls was an accent wall. We got some some frames or paintings or anyways. So we were decorating the room, and then I put my accent wall. And then I felt we had 4 walls in the room. One of them was my accent wall, but I felt that the other 3, they needed a little something as well. So on one of the walls, I decided to put up wallpaper. And on that wallpaper, nice little kid wallpaper. And then on that wallpaper, we put up little floating shelves on there, and try to decorate it really nice. And so now we've moved into, now we have a second child, and that's about what it looks like. That's where he's sleeping on the floor, and it's true. And we haven't painted anything, and maybe one of these days we will. But anyways, coming back to that first room, right? We decorated it really nice. Well, that was in Jacksonville. I don't know if you know or not, but I used to live in Jacksonville, and I moved down here a couple years ago. And so when we decided to move, and when we sold the house, I was taking off those floating shelves that I had on the wall where the wallpaper was. And as I removed those floating shelves, I noticed that it left, holes in the wall, where the floating shelves were attached to the wall. And, if it would have just been regular dry wall, I would have just grabbed a little bit of mud and just, filled it in. But because that wall had wallpaper on it, I was like, oh man, how am I going to fix these? How am I going to fix these holes, with this wallpaper on? And so my realtor and my wife and maybe a few other people, they said, just leave it. Let the next owner, who's going to come in, let him take care of that and fix it. But I have this thing though, I don't know about you or not, but I have this thing that I'm sometimes a little bit stubborn. Anybody else here a little bit stubborn, I have this little thing where sometimes I'm a little bit stubborn. Sometimes I don't listen to what other people are telling me, my realtor and my wife. And I said, no, if I were to buy a home, I would like the home to just be ready, to move in ready. I don't have to fix any walls. I don't have to take down any wallpaper or anything. I'd want the house to be, the way it is that I want. And of course, afterwards I'd fix it up. But so I was like, no, I'm going to take this wallpaper off. And then I'm going to fill in those holes. All right, everybody see some heads that are shaking, and they're doing this, all right? So I don't know if you know or not, but I'm not really a handyman kind of a person. I mean, I'm learning little by little. I pull out YouTube, do-it-yourself kind of videos and things like that. So, I Googled how to remove wallpaper. And so, they say, well, you spray it down, right? And you get it nice and wet, maybe even a steamer if you're fancy, to just make sure the glue comes off of, and you just pull it off. And so some of you know where I'm going. Maybe some of you know this by experience. And so sure enough, I soak up my wall and I steam it and I get it nice and wet and whatever. And I'm like, all right, this thing is good. And so I went to, take off the wallpaper. And as I went to take off the wallpaper, this is what happened to my drawing. How many of you saw that coming? How many of you knew that? How many of you have been there and have done that? And so I was like, oh, well, that wasn't expecting that, And so I was like, well, let me wet it a little bit more. So I wetted it a little bit more and steamed it a little bit more. And then I continued to, pull. And every time I pulled, it just kept looking like that. Now, this wall here, it looks kind of nice. My wall looked like, the entire wall looked like this is what ended up happening, And so I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to have to now fix this, And so I'm like, how do you fix, wallpaper? So again, I Google it, do it yourself. I found a video of a guy. It was like a 10-minute video, and the guy was like, yeah, you just, you grab this, buy this little metal. What do they call that? I want to call it a spatula, but I don't know what it is. Anyways, it's like this little metal flat, tool. You buy a tray, you buy mud. And on the video, on that YouTube video, the guy was like, yeah, you just, you put it a little bit here, and then just apply steady pressure, and just left to right, up and down, just smooth, up and down, just smooth, just left to right, just smooth. I was like, oh, this is a piece of cake. I can do this, So I go to Home Depot and I, grab all the material and then I put it on there, just applying the right kind of pressure, just left to right, up and down. And by the time I was finished, it looked like a topographical map of the Rocky Mountains. I don't know if you can envision what that looks like. And I'm like, where did I go wrong? The guy on YouTube said it was just easy, it was just smooth, just left to right, applying even pressure. That's what I did. How did this happen? It's like, man, I got to sand all this down. And so I called my friend. I don't know what to do. So I called my friend, and he's a handyman. And I'm like, hey, Raj, I need some help, Then I explained to him the whole situation. And I was like, man, but I watched this YouTube video, and the guy was saying it was just smooth. It was just easy. It was just, left to right, up and down, applying smooth pressure. And, Roger kind of laughed at me, and he said, Jonathan, what that guy on YouTube didn't tell you is that he has been doing, drywall work for like 20 or 30 years. He has been doing it all his life. He is skilled. He says this is almost like art. What he does with that mud and on that drywall, it's almost like what Michelangelo did on the Sistine Chapel and the frescoes. I mean, the plaster. It's almost the same. You just, he's like, I'm a handyman. I've been a handyman for forever. I hate skimming walls. It is hard. It's not that easy. And he said, but don't worry, Jonathan. I'll come over after work and I'll see what I can do. And so sure enough, he came and he helped me, and it definitely looked a lot better from what it looked like. But anyways, goes to show, this is where I finally learned. I finally learned my lesson, and I said, we all have our giftedness and our area of expertise. Did you catch that? The guy on YouTube that was making it look so smooth and so easy, it's because he had put in the work, years and years of work, 20 plus years of work to make it look easy. He had his area of expertise. We can't all be experts in every field. No matter how much I would like to learn how to skim a wall smoothly, I don't have the time, and I don't have the energy and the know-how to be able to put that work in. And so this is where we need an expert. This is where we need a specialist to come in. I can brush my teeth and I can floss after every meal, but if I have a cavity, I'm going to need to see an expert, right? Someone who put in the time, right? I can eat healthy and I can exercise, but if I need surgery or if I need some prescriptions, I'm going to have to see a physician, right? Someone who has put in the expertise, an expert in their field, a specialist. And that's why we need electricians and plumbers and engineers. We can't all do it ourselves. We all have our giftedness in our area of expertise. And so, while I believe that the Bible is clear, well, I believe that the Bible is a lamp that, for the most part, everyone can understand the Bible. We also have limits. And this is where pastors come in, This is where theologians come in. This is where scholars come in. This is where the church comes in when the church puts study committees together on different topics. This is where commentaries come in because we don't all have the time or the expertise to understand everything about the Bible. We all have our different giftedness and our area of expertise. And so when we're talking about studying the Bible, and particularly today, how not to study the Bible, I just want to share with you some Bible passages. There are some things in the Bible that are hard to be understood. This is the Apostle Peter here, 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 16. The Apostle Peter, commenting on Paul's writings, he says, the Apostle Paul, in his letters, they contain some things that are, Richie, hard to understand. This is the Apostle Peter saying. And notice what happens though, and this is where we need caution. That's why our sermon today is entitled, How Not to Study the Bible. Peter acknowledges there's some things that are harder to understand in the Bible, and you have to be careful. And he says, which ignorant and unstable people distort. Now, this is a strong word. He uses the word ignorant. It comes across strongly, but what Peter what he really means is it's just some people don't know. That's what he's trying to mean by ignorant. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes we just don't know. How many of you have been there? Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes I just didn't know that I shouldn't have taken that wallpaper off of there. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just didn't know. I wasn't a bad person or a terrible person, but I just didn't know. Sometimes there are people, when they approach the Bible, they just don't no fault of their own, but sometimes there's people who don't know. Number two, though, sometimes there's a little bit of instability with certain people. Now here, Peter's actually delving into an emotional issue, but sometimes a combination of not knowing, sometimes a combination of emotional instability, and when you put those two together on top of a difficult passage to understand, what sometimes happens is that passage then becomes distorted. He says they distort the hard things of what Paul says, and they sometimes will distort some of the other scriptures, all right? And this is where the specialists and the experts and those who have skill and training come in. Here's another Bible passage. This is Hebrews chapter 5. And verses 11 through 14. And now this is the Apostle Paul speaking in the book of Hebrew. He says, we have much to say about that particular topic that he's talking about in Hebrews 5. You can look it up later. He says, we have much to say about this, but some of these things are hard, he says, hard to explain. And though you ought to be teachers by now, you need someone to teach you the basic truths of God's Word. You need milk, not solid food. There's, I think, a previous sermon where I talked about the difference of milk and solid food. Nothing wrong with milk, right? If you're a baby, you need milk, right? You need baby food. You need soft food. If you're an adult and you're still drinking milk and baby food, well, maybe something's wrong there, right? Or vice versa. If you're giving solid food to a baby, it's not healthy. And there's, applications for church members, for new church members who come in. Let's maybe go slow in how they grow in what we share with them. But anyways, it says you need milk, not solid food. For those who drink milk are, there's the word, unskilled. Unskilled. Just like me skimming that wall, I had no skill. No, I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying my best, sincere heart. It's okay. But there's a level of skill. Some are unskilled in the word of righteousness, for they are infants. Solid food, however, is for the mature, who through training, here it is, training, time, effort, skill, they've been able to put in the work. Now they have skill to discern between, right and wrong. Again, this is where the role of pastors and theologians and scholars and church committees and commentaries come in. There are people who have dedicated themselves to the study of God's Word. All right, here's another one. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 through 7. And this also sounds a little bit harsh. This is the Apostle Paul talking to Timothy, and he says, there's some people, Timothy, there in your church in Ephesus, there's some people there who want to be teachers. But, this Apostle Paul, but they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, that sounds a little harsh. It sounds a little harsh, but Paul is just, being direct with Timothy. They want to be teachers, but the problem is they don't know what they're talking about, or what they so confidently affirm. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but sometimes being very assertive in what you're saying, sometimes I've noticed the people who are the loudest in what they're saying are the ones who least know what they're talking about. I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if there's a direct correlation with that, But the Apostle Paul says there's some people who want to, but the truth is they don't know what they're talking about or what they so confidently affirmed. And then, finally, 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15, talking to Timothy again. Timothy is a pastor at the church of Ephesus, and in 2 Timothy, the Apostle Paul says, study. He says, study, put in the time, the skill, the effort, study to show yourself approved unto God, a worker who doesn't need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And there's that word there, rightly. There's a certain skill, certain amount of time that you have to develop to rightly divide the word of truth. That word there, rightly, in the Greek, it comes from the word orthotomeo. Does that first prefix sound right? Ortho. Have you heard that before? Ortho, right? Like an orthopedic. Orthopedic means straight, right? Someone who will help you with your muscles and your bones to get it straight. The idea is of a plumb line. You put that plumb line down because you want that wall to be straight. You don't want it to be crooked. I have a neighbor who's building a fence right now, and he's thrown his line, and he wants to make sure that his fence post, right, that his fence is straight. That's the idea there. Orthotomeo, make sure it's straight. Make sure the road is straight. Rightly dividing the word of truth. Let me make sure that we're doing it. So, what I shared with you last week is a good starting point. Reading the Bible 10 times, listening to it, reading it with pen and paper in hand. It's all important. But as you do that, just remember there may be some limitations. It doesn't mean you have to read every passage like that. There is a role for pastors, theologians, scholars, church committees, and commentaries as well. But as you continue to study the Bible, just be aware that there are some pitfalls. Dangers that you may need to be aware of, limitations that we all have, and that's why we all need each other. So one of the first pitfalls or dangers that we need to be aware of as we're engaging with the Scriptures is in the Bible we have different types of genres. And the way that you read the different types of genres will be different based on the genre. So first of all, you have historical narratives or narratives, especially in the Old Testament, a little bit in the New Testament, all right? Sometimes when you're reading these narratives, how many of you had this experience? You're reading the Bible, you're reading the narratives, and you have no idea what they're talking about. Anybody have that experience, right? I'm going to share with you an example of that, right? Because what you're missing as you're reading it is a little bit of historical context, and this is where, again, the scholars come in and commentaries come in. So here's a passage. Even when you're reading the prophets, sometimes these things are difficult to understand. But here's one in Isaiah. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem. How many of you you resonated with that passage? Right? It's like, who? Wait, what? How do you even pronounce these names? It's like, what's going on? All right, so you need a little bit of historical context to help make sense of what you're reading. So when you're reading historical narratives, it sometimes doesn't make sense because you need a little bit of extra historical context. That sometimes happens with the prophets. Ezekiel, the minor prophets. It's like, what's going on here? All right, we have different genres in the Bible. We need to read them differently. Here's another one. Sometimes in the Bible, you have legal matters that are being dealt with. The largest legal documents that we have in the Old Testament are the 5 books of Moses, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. We're dealing with legal content here. How do you read legal content? What do we do with this stuff? So check out this Bible passage here in Leviticus 19 and verse 19. Do not wear clothing woven of mixed materials. It's an Old Testament law there. All right. Have you checked the tag on your clothing? Have you looked to see, right? How do we read this? Does this still apply or does not apply, right? How do we read this, right? This is important, right? Okay, let's keep going, right? Just be careful how you read things. And as Seventh-day Adventists, we say, well, no, Leviticus 11, the clean and unclean foods, we still follow that, but then, wait, we don't follow this anymore. Well, why not, right? What's the rationale? What's the reason, right? That's where we go to the commentaries and whatnot, okay? In the Bible, you have different genres, narrative. You may need historical information to help understand what's going on in prophecy, the legal issues. When you get to the wisdom literature, which is like Job or Psalms, the poetry, the songs, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, you read it a little bit differently. Like Song of Solomon, if you've ever read Song of Solomon, right, we don't read that literally. How many of you read that literally, right? We don't read that literally. We realize, this is poetry that's being involved here. There's a song involved here. Some of the Psalms pose challenges in reading the Psalms. I don't know if you've read this one, Psalm 137. I don't know if you want to open your Bibles there. Psalm 137, it poses a challenge when you read it. Psalm 137, verse 1, I think it says, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and we wept. And as you keep reading Psalm 137, it ends with this verse here. And yes, it's in the Bible. It ends with this verse. Psalm 137. How blessed will be the one who grabs your babies. Wait a minute. Hold on a sec here. Where is this going? How blessed will be the one who grabs your babies and smashes them on a rock. Psalm 127 and verse 9. How do we read this? How do we interpret this? What, is this in the Bible? And so, what happens, what I've heard a lot of people say, the Bible isn't inspired. Look at this Bible passage that it's calling us to grab babies and smash them on a rock. How many of you feel that? I mean, I feel that when I read this passage, right? And some people say, of course the Bible's not inspired. Look at this. How can this possibly be inspired? Well, again, how we read different genres matters. And so what's going on here in the wisdom writings, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, mainly because our kids are in children's church right now, so we can, as adults, we can talk about this here a little bit. It may get a little bit dark, but let me talk about this a little bit. How do we process this song? Is this inspired? Is this right? Is it not right? What's going on here? You see, this is poetry, and you're like, well, what kind of poetry is that? This is a song. Well, what kind of song is this? What's going on here in Psalm 127, or it's 130, is that 137 or 127? 127? 137. Sorry, I got the reference wrong. Thank you. I was like, wait a minute. Okay. 137. Sorry about that. 137. What's going on here is that the person who wrote this is experiencing, they're feeling something. They're feeling something. They're feeling an emotion. They're feeling an emotion of rage is what they're doing. And you're like, well, this isn't, what kind of a feeling of rage? Well, let me tell you a little bit about what's happened here in Psalm 137. It's a cry against Babylon. It is an imprecation, a psalm of imprecation. In fact, there's a painting. It's just a visceral depiction of what's going on in Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and we wept. This painting here is from 1882, Evelyn de Morgan, oil on canvas. All right, what's happening with the author of 137 is that they are in captivity in Babylon. This is what they've experienced. Their own babies have been slaughtered. Their own babies have been slaughtered. I think some of you know, I lost my first son. It wasn't in a violent act of slaughter, but my first son, he died. And I guarantee you, I was feeling things. I was feeling all kinds of things. Feelings in themselves are not bad. Feelings are feelings. You have no control over the feelings. The feelings come and the feelings go. What matters is how you respond to those feelings and how you process those feelings. And so in this context, the writer of Psalm 137, their babies have just been slaughtered by Babylon. The women have been violated. The men have been killed. Their houses have been burned down. I don't know if you've ever lost everything you've ever owned and how you feel about that. We even believe that some of these individuals, some of these captives from Israel have even been made eunuchs. We believe Daniel and his friends were made eunuchs. They've had to have walked over 900 miles in chains from Israel all the way to Babylon. 900 miles takes about 4 months to walk. It's like walking from Tampa to Washington, D.C. In the context of your baby slaughters, your women violated, your men killed, your houses burned, being made a eunuch. The person who is writing Psalm 137 is feeling something. And in fact, what we're seeing in the Bible is that God welcomes you to express, he invites you to express how you're feeling authentically with him. God says, please share with me. Don't hide it. Don't keep it. Share exactly how you're feeling. There's nothing wrong with sharing how you're feeling. The person who's writing this is feeling an intense emotion here. In fact, if you don't mind me going even a little bit more graphic, there was the king during this time, King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah, I guess he was a bad king. I don't like to judge people. I don't like to judge people. I don't want to judge the person who wrote Psalm 137. I don't like to judge people because I haven't been in their shoes. Have any of you been in a situation like this? Where your babies have been slaughtered, your women violated, men killed, houses burned, and you've been taken captive to a foreign land? Have you ever been in that situation before? So I don't like to judge people. Zedekiah, a bad king, I guess. I don't want to judge him either. But Zedekiah disobeyed the word of the Lord. Through the prophet Jeremiah, God told Zedekiah, you need to surrender to the king of Babylon. And if you surrender the nation to the king of Babylon, it's going to be okay. Now, I don't want to judge Zedekiah, but that's kind of like North Korea comes attacking the United States of America. And the word of the Lord is, United States of America, you just need to surrender. And it's going to be okay. How would you take that message? Russia is attacking the United States of America. United States of America, you just need to surrender. It's going to be okay. Just go into captivity to Moscow, to Russia, to wherever, to Siberia. It's going to be okay. How many of you take well to a message like that? So that's why I don't want to judge Zedekiah. The word of the Lord is telling Zedekiah, you need to surrender to the Babylonians, and it's going to be okay. And you need to go into captivity, and it's going to be okay. Zedekiah, for whatever reasons of nationalism, of patriotism, no, we don't surrender here. For whatever it is, Zedekiah disobeyed the word of the Lord, and as a result, Nebuchadnezzar came and he placed a siege against Jerusalem for 4 months until they were starving to death inside the city. When they finally penetrated the walls, Zedekiah fled. Nebuchadnezzar and his army went after Zedekiah. He found Zedekiah. He grabbed Zedekiah. Zedekiah is only 32 years old. He's a young king. He's 32 years old. And Nebuchadnezzar says, Zedekiah, where are your sons? He brings the sons of Zedekiah. I don't know how old the sons of Zedekiah are, but if Zedekiah is 32 years old, I imagine maybe his oldest is a teenager. Maybe, right? Help me out. Maybe 15, maybe 16 at the most. I don't know. I can't imagine his sons being that old. They were probably teenagers, maybe adolescents. The majority were probably children. And Nebuchadnezzar brings the sons of Zedekiah in front of him. He slaughters the sons of Zedekiah in front of Zedekiah's eyes. And then the next thing the king of Nebuchadnezzar does is then he burns Zedekiah's eyes. Because what the king Nebuchadnezzar wanted was that the last image that Zedekiah sees is the slaughter of his sons. That's why I don't want to judge Zedekiah. He's bad, he's good. I don't think anybody deserves something like that, whether they were good or bad. But that's what happened. And then King Nebuchadnezzar takes King Zedekiah blind with his eyes burned out or whatever, however he did it. He takes him, puts chains on him, and takes Zedekiah, he's 32 years old, and takes him prisoner to Babylon so that everyone will see what happens to you when you defy the king of Babylon. And so here are the captives, Psalm 137. They're by the rivers of Babylon, and they're seeing this beautiful, you see the contrast, and you see this beautiful city of Babylon, the great city of Babylon, and by the rivers of Babylon, but they are captives there. Their babies have been slaughtered. They're surrounded by all this beauty and all this wealth and all their luxury, but it's at the cost of their babies being slaughtered, their women violated, their men killed, their houses burned, being turned into eunuch. The author of Psalm 137 is feeling something. Newport Richie, can you understand that? It's not telling us to go out and do the same thing, but the author is simply expressing how they feel, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. He's just being honest and open about his experience. In the Bible, you have different type of genre, and how you read it makes a difference. And so you have to be careful. Narratives, some historical information, prophecy, some historical information, legal content, wisdom, the poetry, the songs. And then you have a parable, which, how are we doing on time? I had a parable for you today, but I don't know. It had to do with the cookies and the chips and the salsa, but I don't know how we're doing with time. I don't know if you can hear the parable or not. You let me know when we come to that part of the sermon. You let me know if you want to hear it or not. We have parables. How we read the parables makes a difference. You have epistles. in the Bible. How we read the epistles makes a difference. It will be different than how we read other things. So the Apostle Paul writes an epistle to the Corinthians. There is context when he writes that epistle. How many of you were here for that communion service that I did a couple of weeks ago? Right? There's context. When you're reading what he's writing and he says, your meetings do more harm than good, there's a context that's taking place there that sometimes we don't know about. When he writes to the Corinthians and he says, if a guest were to walk into your worship service and they would see what you're doing, this is 1 Corinthians 14, and they would see what you're doing, the guests would say, you guys are crazy, you're out of your mind. There's a context there that we don't know. And so it's in this context that the Apostle Paul writes this. Is the Apostle Paul a misogynist? What's going on with the Apostle Paul? It can't be inspired. The Bible can't be inspired because look, how could it say something like this? Women should remain silent in the churches. I've heard people quote that to me. Say, Pastor, that's why we can't have women preachers. That's why we can't have women on the platform. Because the Apostle Paul says women need to be silent in the churches. He says, do not allow them to speak, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church, all right? This can't be inspired. He's a misogynist. No, wait a minute. There's a context here that we don't know about. He's not a misogynist. There's something going on here. So be careful how you read the Bible. And then finally, we have apocalyptic literature in the Bible. Be careful, please, how you read the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel. The book of Revelation is drawing. The book of Revelation is a literary tapestry where the Apostle John is drawing. He's weaving this tapestry together. He is drawing from different places in the Old Testament. And if you're not grounded in Old Testament biblical studies, you are not going to pick up on the allusions, and you're going to make the wrong connections, and you're going to end up with the locusts in Revelation being black, unmarked helicopters from FEMA. I've heard it. I mean, you laugh because you probably have heard it as well. Be careful how you read the Bible. And this is, again, where we have limitations, and this is where pastors, commentaries, scholars, other people come in to help us with some of these difficult passages of the Bible. So beware of the different genre that you're reading in the Bible. Also beware of when you read a passage of overly spiritualizing a passage. The Bible will spiritualize certain things. It will allegorize certain things. You'll read that in the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul says, well, this mountain represents this and this woman represents that. But be careful with that. Be careful with typology. There is typology in the Bible, but be careful with it. Bible codes, I don't know if you've heard about that. There is a little bit of that in the Bible. Number 666, have you read about that, right? And then, what's going on there with this? There are numbers in the Bible. Careful with proof texting. Careful with eisegesis. That's kind of a word here. Eisegesis means you are reading into the Bible passage something that's not there. Be careful with reading into the text what's not there. What we want is exegesis, that is coming out from the text. Allow the passage to speak on its own. Don't be putting in your ideas there, like I shared last week with the guy and the recipe for bread in the book of Ezekiel, and the connections that he's reading those things into the Bible passage. But what we have to do is allow the Bible passage to speak for itself. And then there's this, what the Apostle Paul says. He says, 1 Corinthians 4:6, who controls the meaning and levels of meaning? He says, don't go beyond what is written. Stick with, if the Bible makes an allusion, okay, make that allusion. If the Bible makes that connection, make that connection. If the Bible doesn't make that connection, just be careful. Be careful, okay? Now, I have my parable. Do you guys want to end it here, or do you want to delve into the Oreo cookies and the chips and salsa? What do you guys want to do? All right. Now, I haven't timed this parable, so I don't know how long it's going to take. So you let me know. Yes, Pastor, or no? We can end it here. It is 12:55. I should probably say if you want to leave, you can leave. I don't know. Okay. All right. Well, we'll do it. All right, we'll do it. We'll dive into our parable here. Remember, our sermon title is How Not to Study the Bible. Are you ready? Imagine Bill at a Bible study with a dozen other college students. Okay? All right, so this is Bill, and we're going to experience this Bible study through the eyes of Bill. Okay? Sorry, ladies, I should have said maybe Sally. I don't know. Sorry, but I chose Bill. All right, so imagine Bill, and this is first-person narrative through the eyes of Bill. Imagine Bill at a Bible study with a dozen other college students. This is Bill. This is Bill speaking. It's your first time to the study, and you're a bit uncomfortable. You devoured several cookies and are now washing it down. Wait a minute. Oh, there it is. You're now washing it down with some Mountain Dew. Is that what college students, is that what they eat? Cookies and Mountain Dew? Help me out here, college students. Devoured several cookies and, hold on a sec here, let me try this one. This is a Mountain Dew though. That's okay, it's not bad. A little on the sugary side. Okay. You've devoured several cookies and are now washing it down with some Mountain Dew. A tall, skinny guy sitting to your right, he opens with prayer. You're pretty sure his name is Josh, but you've only met him once. After prayer, Josh reads the passage to be discussed that evening. Here it is. Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10. Follow it there on the screen. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and she says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. There's your Bible passage. You got it? Woman, 10 coins, lost one, lights a lamp in the house. There's a broom. Some other stuff is happening there too. Okay, continues Josh. There's more cookies in the kitchen, and if you need them, and I think we have another bag of Fritos around here somewhere. So what do you think this passage means? What's God trying to teach us here? I don't know, begins a girl with she's wearing a Point of Grace t-shirt. I'm not so sure, but my study Bible, it says that the houses in those days, they had low roofs and they had few windows. So it was kind of hard to see in there. That's why she needed a lamp. Make sense, Newport Richie? Jared, the guy you know from English class last semester, he's sitting across from you eating some Fritos. He sits up and he chimes in. "Oh, yeah. And she has to sweep out the house because the house is dirty." So what we have here, we have a dark, dirty house with not much light. And you know what I think this is? I think this is like the world, you know? I mean, when we drift back into the world, it's like being that coin, not able to see clearly, lost in the dark and in the dirt and in the filth, unable to see Jesus. So the house stands for the world, and we are the coin when we backslide. Jesus, of course, is the one who comes and looks for us and finds us in the dark. What do you think about that, Newport Richie? You like that? Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds good. You're thinking that Jared makes pretty good sense, right? And he is a smart guy. You remember that from English class, and you nod your head like you knew this all the time. That's right. Wait a minute. So you're saying that the woman is Jesus? Objects a big guy named Matt. "I can't go for that," he says. Now, Matt, he's a macho kind of guy. I don't know if you've ever met Matts in your life. Matt is a macho kind of guy. He lives down the hall from you in the dorm during your freshman year. He drives a nice pickup truck, but he's really not a rocket scientist, if you know what I mean. You think he's kidding, but he's not. Jared answers, "It's a parable, Matt. It's a parable. It doesn't matter if they portray Jesus as a woman." That makes sense, Newport Richie? "Well, I don't have any problem with Jesus being played by a woman," says Jessica. Jessica, she's really cute, short with big brown eyes and long, pretty brown hair. In fact, you took her out on a date once last year. You could kick yourself again for not asking her out again. Unfortunately, now she seems to be interested in Jared, so, well, too bad. "But Jared," Jessica continues, "I never thought of the house as referring to the world. When I think of a dark place where people can get lost, I think of the church today. I mean, just look at all the churches today that they're not really following Jesus, and they're just preaching prosperity gospel and pop psychology and TED Talk type motivational stuff. You know, it's like that church in the book of Revelation that Jesus says is lukewarm, the one he's going to spit out of his mouth. What the church really needs today is it needs the light of the gospel. And remember that all those early churches were house churches, weren't they? I mean, they met in houses instead of church buildings like we do today. So, the house could be referring to the churches. It makes sense to me anyways. Newport Richie? Makes sense to you? Sound good so far? Well, Bill, it's making sense to him, especially since Jessica looked right at you and smiled as she finished. You nod your head in agreement. Any moron can see that she's right. But then what would the coin be? Asked Brian. He's a sleepy-looking skater with long, straight hair, you know, the kind that just covers one eye, and then they're just kind of going like this, you know, to kind of be able to see, you know, because it's covering the eye. You know, there's been Brian's, you know Brian's. He's wearing gray checkered shorts, a pair of Vans, and a black Stevie Ray Vaughan t-shirt. Oh, and is there more salsa in the kitchen? Well, responds Jessica, well, maybe the coin, maybe it represents the true, faithful congregations that just seem to get lost in the midst of all those other mega churches with their lights and their lasers and their fog machines and their contemporary Christian music with all those electric guitars and drums. You know, you don't even know what's going on in those churches. You know what I'm talking about, right, Newport Richie? At least that's the way it looks to me. Hey, Brian, the salsa's right there on the counter in the jar. Thanks, Brian. He gets up, lumbers into the kitchen. So then maybe the woman in the story really represents the pastors of the true churches. This is Jared's suggestion. The pastors are the ones that are sweeping out all the false doctrines, trying to find the true believers. Wait a minute. What's with all this woman stuff, says Matt again. First she's Jesus, and now she's the pastors. Come on. We're not a bunch of radical liberal feminists. Come on, Brian, shouts towards the kitchen. If there's any more Cokes in there, bring me one. Brian, he saunters back with a Coke for Matt and a serving of chips and salsa. And, well, I never really thought of the house as being churches, offers the Point of Grace t-shirt girl. If the house is dark and dirty, it's probably referring to our hearts. Isn't that what's dark and dirty in our lives? I mean, we try to follow Christ, but we fail because our hearts aren't clean. However, Jesus comes and he cleans our hearts, just like the woman in the story. He sweeps them out and then forgives us of all our sins. I like to think of Jesus as sweeping out my heart and making me clean. Isn't that neat? Newport Richie? Yeah. She smiles brightly, and then she looks down at her Bible, and she continues. Oh, and look at this. It's really awesome. Look, my study Bible, it says that the brooms they had in the Bible, they were made of numerous 2-foot-long straws bundled together and tied at the top. Wow. You know, it's like straw can't do anything unless they're bundled together, and then they're really strong. The broom is kind of like the Bible. I mean, Jesus sweeps out our heart, right? Well, what does he use to cleanse us? The Bible, right? The Bible is also composed of lots of individual books, and they're all bound up together so that they'll be strong. Jesus cleanses our hearts with the Bible. Isn't that awesome, Newport Richie? You're thinking that the Point of Grace t-shirt gal is pretty insightful into this stuff, and you know, you wish you could find something so deep and spiritual in this passage, but you look down at your Bible, but you can't come up with anything profoundly spiritual about the house or the woman or the coin, and you find yourself a little bit confused as well. Can the house really refer to all these things? Can it be the world? Can it be the backslidden churches? Can it also be our hearts? Or maybe the house just refers to a house. The woman had to live somewhere after all, didn't she? And you wonder which one of these meanings Jessica or Jesus intended. Should you just randomly choose one of the meanings? You're thinking that Jessica made a lot of sense, and you notice that she smiles at you again as she reaches for another cookie. You're trying to recall which meaning was hers. You don't remember. That's okay. You pick up another cookie alongside her, and you decide that perhaps you'll give Jessica a call tomorrow and ask her out on a date again and talk about it some more. How does that sound, Newport Richie? So be careful when you read the Bible, all right? Be aware of the limitations, be aware of the role of commentaries, pastors, theologians, scholars, be aware of the genres, be aware of maybe some of these pitfalls, spiritualizing, allegorizing, typology, Bible codes, proof texting, eisegesis, and I'll leave it at that. I won't tell you what I think about this parable, but I'll let you discuss it over lunch. How about that? That sound good? Okay. All right. Let's stand as we sing our closing song.